I'm going to guess that at some point in your life, you've eaten a chicken breast, beef steak, a pork chop, and a fillet of fish. And since you're watching this video, there's a good chance that you've cooked those as well. But what about chicken gizzards, beef heart, pig's feet, or even fish heads? These latter foods are all examples of offal, which is a broad category that includes everything from the organs of a cow to giblets of fowl to even the eggs of a fish. Offal is an intriguing topic when it comes to food and cooking, but it isn't talked about much. Well, after watching this video, you'll know all about this stuff. We're going to call it Offal 101, and well, I promise you this video won't be, well, awful. Hello and welcome to I Want to Cook. My name is Chef Matt, and yes, today we are tackling offal, and yes, that is the way you pronounce it. Of course, it's spelled different from the other word offal, but offal is, well, this stuff and a lot more. Now, offal is also sometimes known as variety meats or organ meats, the latter referring to everything from liver, heart, kidney, even brains, but it goes way beyond non-skeletal muscular meat. Now, like I said in that intro, offal is a very broad category, and it can include everything from pig's feet to cow cheeks, intestines. I mean, it is just really a lot of, shall we say, odd bits. But they are edible and you can cook them. Now, offal can come from a variety of animals, and what's available in your market will depend on where you live. Here in America, I often find offal from cows, pigs, lambs, chickens, and sometimes fish. And if you're buying these at a store, these cuts have been deemed legal and safe. Here in the US, it's the USDA that regulates these cuts of meat. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of offal. I actually don't eat a whole lot of meat to begin with, and for me, I'm just not a big fan of the taste of offal. But trust me, I have cooked a lot of it, and I still do. My first experience cooking offal came in culinary school, where we had a whole class dedicated to it. And well, it was a learning experience. I mean, we were cooking everything from tongue to sweetbreads to everything in between. And well, let's just say the smell and taste that came out of that class were unforgettable. Now, like I say, I'm not a huge fan of this stuff, but there are certain members of my household who are, and that's actually my dogs. They love this stuff. So every week I'm cooking them up beef heart, kidneys, livers, etc. I actually cover a lot of that on my other channel. I do have a channel devoted to cooking for dogs. It's called Barking Good Chef, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. But anyways, I do cook this stuff every week. And when it comes to you, I always say, just eat what you like. You know, eat what tastes good to you, eat what works for your dietary restrictions, etc. So, hey, if you are a fan of offal, awesome. And if all of this is new to you, well, I hope that it's a learning experience. So let's cover 5 things you need to know about offal. And the first thing is that these are surprisingly available. Now, of course, not all parts are going to be available at all stores, but a lot of them are hiding in plain sight. For example, I regularly find chicken livers in the poultry aisle, and I regularly find beef livers in the frozen section of my supermarket. And if you've ever bought a whole chicken or roasted a turkey for Thanksgiving, that pouch that's in the cavity, well, those are giblets, and those are all considered offal. Those include the heart, the liver, and the gizzards of poultry. You do take those out, right? Now, if you're looking for more options, well, better stocked stores with butcher departments will have them. Mine, for example, has a surprising array of offal, especially from cow and pig. Of course, you can find different cuts at ethnic markets, and I did a whole video on why you should be shopping at ethnic markets, and if you like offal, well, that's one of them, because you're probably going to find some different cuts of meats there than you would at a mainstream grocer. My favorite Mexican market down the street, for example, sells huge swaths of pig skin, crispy and fried up, and if you've never had that stuff, it is quite tasty. The second thing you should know about offal is that it can be quite inexpensive, especially compared to more of the popular cuts of meat. I mean, especially something like beef kidney here, I get a whole kidney for just like a couple bucks. And that can go a long way in feeding your family, four-legged or otherwise. Here in America, these are kind of considered cast-off parts, so because they might be less desirable, they're often less expensive, but they can still pack a lot of nutrients. When I was growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of money in my household, but my Italian mother made every cent count. And one of our favorite meals was she would make sugu with neck bones. That was like an Italian marinara sauce, but loaded with these pork neck bones. And, you know, we didn't even know this at the time that we were eating cheaply, but neck bones are totally inexpensive and they add a ton of flavor. Years later, I would go on to do my best to replicate that recipe and make my own. And let me tell you, the smells that came out of the kitchen that day, well, they reminded me of childhood.
Nice.
And there's actually a good chance that you've eaten offal and you just didn't know it. If you've ever had sausage, for example, well, that's often encased in intestines, which are technically offal. Or technically skin. You know, skin is the largest organ of an animal. So if you've ever had, let's say, fried chicken with the skin on, well, you're eating offal. And see, it can be really, really good. The third thing you might be wondering, well, is it safe? Well, yeah, like I say, here in America, it's regulated just like any other meat that's sold in a store and deemed safe for human consumption. But one thing you definitely want to know about offal is that it is highly perishable. You really want to use this stuff soon, like a day or two after you buy it. It just tends to be more perishable than other cuts of meat. And some parts that are sold in other countries won't be legal in others. Lungs, for example, which are used in haggis, well, those are not legal for sale here in America. The fourth thing to know about offal is cooking times and the way it cooks. And well, that will really depend on the cut. Cooking time can take as little as just a few minutes for something small like chicken livers to hours and hours for something bigger like tongue. And let me tell you, the tongue we made that day in culinary class, it took hours to just boil in that big pot, but it really wasn't that bad. In fact, I kind of liked it. We actually made tongue tacos. I believe that's tacos de lengua. And they were really quite good. In fact, the taste and the texture kind of reminded me of pastrami. For the most part, when I personally cook offal, and again, I cook it a lot, I usually just saute it in a skillet until it's done. Although for this tripe here, I will be boiling it, and I'll do the same for these pig's trotters that I think my dogs are really going to enjoy. And of course, something like menudo, that classic Mexican soup that uses tripe and that is just simmered for a long time until it is nice and done and tasty. Now, the fifth thing to know about offal is that it can have a strong smell and a strong taste. I'm smelling it right here, just making this video. And so yes, it does have kind of a strong, unique taste that's different from other cuts of meat. One pro tip if you're cooking offal is, if you can, cook it outside. That's actually what I do because I'm just not a big fan of those smells going into the house. So I just set up a little burner outside and, well, I cook it outside and let all those smells waft away and, well, make all the other dogs in the neighborhood very jealous and probably a few humans too. And I'm going to give you a bonus 6th tip about offal, and that is that, well, names may not always be what they seem. So for example, sweetbreads have nothing to do with pastry, and Rocky Mountain oysters, well, those aren't seafood. The first is actually the thymus gland of an animal. It's actually quite tasty. It is kind of delicate. It's usually pan-fried. It's quite good, in fact. And, well, Rocky Mountain oysters or prairie oysters, I've never tried those. I probably won't intend to. Let's just say those are parts that are private. So there you go. There is my Offal 101 primer. Whether you intend to cook this stuff or you're just kind of curious about what it is, I hope this video helped. I would love to know from you, do you enjoy this stuff? Maybe you grew up eating it. Maybe it's something that is traditional in your family. Be sure to comment below and let me know your thoughts. Okay, trivia time. Last week I asked you to identify these strange kind of curly wrinkled peppers, and a couple of you got it. It was a little bit of a stumper, but a few of you knew it. These are indeed shishito peppers, one of my favorite peppers to cook, in fact. I did a whole video on cooking shishito peppers. These are traditionally charred in a cast iron skillet until they are absolutely blackened and softened, and they are oh so delicious. I'll put a link to that video in the description below, but yes, these are shishito peppers and I highly recommend cooking them. For this week's trivia, we are whipping out another tool. What could this thing be? It's not a musical instrument, there's a hint. If you know what this is, put it in the comments below and I will let you know the correct answer in the next video. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Until next time, I hope you want to cook.